teacher and friend, the Reverend Mark Fowler.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. Good morning, everyone in Zoom land. And you didn't hear, it was really kind of a little bit of a rocky start back into the song. And we made it back in. But that wasn't on your end. That was real. It was over here. It was a little bit of a time delay. It's always just so joyous to be here. The amount of time, the way time moves and how quickly it moves, because the beginning of next year will be 10 years that I've been in relationship with New Thought Spiritual Center of Eastern Long Island. I can't believe it. So, and to be here, Bruce, happy birthday. It's so wonderful. And Alexis, happy birthday to you. I mean, both of you in particular have been people in my journey who've just always been loving and supportive and kind, and I so appreciate that. So happy birthday to both of you. It's interesting that I really felt compelled to acknowledge 9/11 in some way, because it has now kind of become this marker of a moment in time where we, not just in the United States, but I think in the world, are forever changed and continue trying to unpack those moments and everything that has ensued from it. So I definitely wanted to take a moment to honor and remember the people who lost their lives that day, all of the first responders. But I also think that I wanted to also remember that there were a group of people who were convinced or accepted the idea of the separation of people. That there were somehow a group of people who were different enough from themselves that they could take such violent action, that they accepted the lie of the separation of humanity, and that possibility continues to exist today. And so as spiritual people, we have to be mindful that we are not separated one from another, and we have to demonstrate that. Truth that all know and share. So with that, I'd also like for you to remember the second part of your mission statement, because I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But the second sentence of your mission statement says, we acknowledge our unity with God and each other and demonstrate this truth in our life. I just want you to keep that, just hang on to that for a second, because I want to come back to that in this idea of the myth of acceptance, which is the thought for the day. So the gospel, according to Merriam-Webster, says that acceptance is, or at least 2 of the 5 definitions for acceptance, the quality or state of being accepted or acceptable. The quality or state of being accepted or acceptable. And the second definition is somewhat similar, but it's the act of accepting something or someone. So that acceptance is actually not just a quality or a state of being, but acceptance is also an act where we do something. The act of accepting something or someone, or the fact of being accepted, of knowing oneself as accepted. So those are the 2 kind of interesting definitions about acceptance. And there are a couple of questions that I'd like for you to consider as we kind of dig into this a little bit. The first is, what have you accepted as the truth of your relationship with God? What have you accepted? Kind of the way Oprah used to talk about it. What do you know for sure? What have you accepted as the truth of your relationship with God? The second question, what are the facts of the dynamic of acceptance in your life? What are the facts? How does acceptance work in your life? And maybe part of looking at how does acceptance work is how does refusal work? And how does denial work in your life? And then the third question is, what could you accept that you haven't yet? What could you accept that you haven't yet? And another way of thinking about that question is, what's ready to come into your life? It's kind of over there, off to the side, gnawing at the back of your brain, scratching around in your spirit. Like, what could you accept that you haven't yet? So the first myth that I want to explore is the idea that you can accept God without accepting yourself. That you can accept God in all of what you imagine God's magic and splendor and wonder and peace and grace, that you can accept God fully without accepting yourself. That somehow those two things could be happening at the same time. So here's a short excerpt from The Science of Mind. This subjective law knows there is a John Smith and a Mary Jones. Why? Because John Smith and Mary Jones know that there is a John Smith and Mary Jones. But it only knows about them what they know about themselves. It, divine mind, only knows about them what they know about themselves, being subjective to their thought. It could not know anything else. Consequently, whatever John Smith and Mary Jones say, it says, accepts, and does. This is a marvelous concept. Unless we have thought it out, it may seem rather startling, but it means this, that the law absolutely accepts us at our own valuation. The law absolutely accepts us at our own valuation. Now, this does not mean that it accepts us at an assumption of valuation, but at the actual valuation. It can reflect to us only the actual embodiment of ourselves. It is the deep inner conviction that we carry which decides what is going to happen. So we are each known by the name we bear, and each is daily making some statement about that name. Now, I know that that could be kind of heady, but when you think about your current relationship with God, the divine, sacred mystery, however you relate to that, how would you describe it? Because I know for myself, and I think we're all on a journey of knowing God intimately, immediately, and personally. If you will, I relate to it as the indwelling experience of God. When we take that moment of meditation to actually have that recognition of the indwelling presence, that it is not something happening out there, but it is here connected with me in this sanctuary. But this excerpt gives us another level of thinking about acceptance of God, because it asserts that God knows us as we know ourselves. And we sometimes live in this dichotomy of thinking that we can accept all that God is, even as a possibility, and yet hold limited thinking of ourselves. But to actually accept all that God is means that we also must accept all that we are and be able to speak it. And what we speak and how we know ourselves is how God knows us. If we accepted, or if we're accepted at our own valuation, then it would follow that if you think differently about yourself, if you think differently about your situation, about your family member, your partner, then God will think differently also. It will reflect what you think, and all of its power will align with yours, and the circumstance will be altered. But as long as it is that God is magnificent and you are some work in progress, then that is what God will reflect. So sometimes we are thwarting our own efforts at the experience of our own grace. Unknowingly, thinking that somehow God is going to come in and save us. And God can do that. But I would say to you, it's the moment when you know that you can be saved, when you can be assisted, when you can be helped, when the circumstance can change, that's when it does. The prayer is answered when it is made. I know it's a little heavy for a birthday day, but this was some good stuff. This was some good stuff, because when we talk about intuition, that deep inner conviction, deciding, our conviction decides, our inner knowing decides. So when you have that moment when you're about to step out on the precipice of that new thing, and you say to yourself, I'm not ready, then you are not. When that blessing comes, when that grace comes, and you say, I am not worthy, then you are not. And God is not doing anything to you. God is reflecting the value you are placing on yourself at that moment. And as soon as you change it, God will reflect and change it with you. Not for you, but with you. And that gives me a little bit of hope, because then I have a little bit more to do with what I call my suffering. The second myth, acceptance is a feeling. Acceptance is a feeling, feels good. Acceptance is a feeling. The definition says the act of accepting something or someone, or the fact of being accepted, tells us that an act means something decisive happens. When we accept something, we make a decision that we will know the truth about something. We're deciding that we are now going to know the truth about this thing. And that doesn't always mean that it is fun. Because sometimes when we come to the truth of something, it is the ugliness of something that we must accept and know so that we can then do something with it. But simply because we accept something doesn't mean that it's going to always feel good. Some of the things that we have to accept have brought us to our very knees. But without the accepting of it, we would have never been able to go on with life. So your statement, right, your second statement in your mission statement, we acknowledge our unity with God and each other and demonstrate this truth in our life. So before I say another word, let me say, don't go up to Joseph after this and say, Mark said. I'm telling you now. Don't go up to the board and tell them Mark said about the mission statement. I'm telling you now, leave them alone. I'm taking full responsibility for this. The mission statement is fine. And it's a powerful statement. But then you've got to ask yourself, as a body, do you acknowledge your unity with God and each other? And do you demonstrate it in your life? It's not just something that sounds good. It's not something to make you feel good. And then in thinking about this word, what would it be like if the statement was, or you live the statement as, we accept our unity with God and each other and demonstrate this truth in our lives? Because acknowledging is one thing. Making that decision of the truth of something, that we accept our unity with God and each other, gives you a slightly different place to operate from. And again, leave Joseph alone. Don't go running up to him telling him that Mark said we need to change the mission statement. I did not say that. The devil is a liar. I did not say that. But what I am saying is that the way in which you live your mission can be done so consciously and thoughtfully with the idea that you accept your unity with God and each other. You accept it. It is done. It is truth. It is a foregone conclusion. So when you see each other in Cinderella, or when that person says that thing to you that just made you, I accept that I am in unity with God and this woman. That's it. Final myth, last thing. The third myth, you've accepted all you can. You've accepted all you can. There's a laugh of recognition going on in the room for those of you on Zoom. You all may be laughing at home as well, and we just can't see. You've accepted all you can. So the third question that I asked you to consider, what could you accept that you haven't yet? Or what's ready to come into your life? If acceptance is a state or quality of being accepted or acceptable, and if acceptance is an act of accepting something or someone, then the invitation today for all of us is to consider, what could you accept into your life today? It's that thing that's over there, scratching around in your soul. And then we have to then deal with the thoughts that we have that we don't have the capacity to accept another thing or to hold another thing. Like, I've got all that I can do right now with what I've got to deal with. But remember, we are the valuation of our own thought. So if you find yourself thinking or saying, I'm not ready to accept that, or be that, or do that, then God will reflect that back to you, and it will be so. So could you increase the valuation you have of yourself so God can know that valuation and mirror it back to you? Just as an experiment. Like maybe just try it just to see for a ha-ha. Just see maybe, like maybe it might work out. Remember that you're not doing anything alone. And when we were working together in the prayer chaplain training, one of the things that I said to the group was, you're not doing anything when it comes to being a prayer. You're not doing anything. It doesn't matter whether you're good at it or not. Prayer is going to happen anyway. But what we're saying is, what they were saying is that we are going to offer ourselves to service, to be conduits such that prayer can be present and the opportunity of healing can be present. And if we're in constant communication with the divine, then there's nothing that happens in the absence of God. Nothing happens in the absence of God. So today, try, accept a little more, know a little more, be a little more, do a little more. Closing thought. Self-acceptance is my refusal to be in an adversarial relationship with myself. That's from Nathaniel Brandon. Self-acceptance is my refusal to be in an adversarial relationship with myself. God bless you. Thank you so much.